I am next, right?
Yes.
With the chair's report, it's my job each month to give you a quick update of what happened in the previous board meeting, although Brad's right here, he could do it. I missed the meeting last month because I had family in the hospital, although I did watch YouTube, and I invite all of you guys to watch the meeting on YouTube. The December meeting was real quiet, it was Christmas time, and so it was most end of the year stuff. But what I noticed most was that Elizabeth was there giving our report to them. It's going to be my job every month to give our report to them. We have a standing bullet on their agenda. So when we have something we want the board to hear, first we can chew on his ear, but also we get time in front of that committee. So it will be my job a week from tomorrow to talk about this meeting and to chew on their ear. The first thing was that they changed their leadership. Janet Long stepped down after 2 years, and she's done a great job. Our new leaders are going to be Joe Barkley and Pat Gerard as the vice chair. Joe, I don't know if you guys know, has been on PSTA forever. Since 2013, he went through the green light with us. What a great chance to have him this year. And Pat Gerard, I didn't realize this, is incoming as the chair of the Pinellas County Commission. So hokey smokes, we've got as our chair, as your chair, and vice chair, I think two of the most cognizant, powerful, connected, right people. This is the right people in the right ear. So if we're going to try and get something done, these are the guys to do it. Janet, by the way, Commissioner Long, like I'm acting like we're old buddies, Commissioner Long is rolling off from being chair to the legislative liaison, the head of the legislative liaison. And Gloria, when we made the presentation to Forward Pinellas, if you remember, she was right there saying, we need to do this with the legislators. So she's going to be leading that. So again, I felt really great learning all that. The rest of the meeting was stuff, they see the same stuff we do. We got the presentation on the Good Samaritans, which we saw here, the presentation from the looper of the electronic bus that we saw here. And so I'm impressed about what great presentations we received. We also saw the scorecard that we saw here. And again, what a great year that these guys had. So, we, as the TRAC committee, are getting the same good information that the board is getting. I think maybe we're the dry run on that. We're probably spring training. Anyway, the two pieces that that were added was the Feeding Tampa Bay. I don't know if we want to talk about the fact that Feeding Tampa Bay was so successful.
Yeah, December 3rd, we had our second of four partnerships with Feeding Tampa Bay. What that is where we have partnered, where we have a food bank truck come to PSTA. We've had, the first two have been here at PSTA. My goal is to have it at one of our other transit centers, to move it around the county if we possibly can. I'm not sure if they'll agree to that, but hopefully they might. And then it was incredible. We had more people at the second one than at the first one. Of course, most of the people that come to it are riding the bus to come get access food. And it's really, they like it too because, they do these kind of food banks all over the region, over in Tampa and Pasco. And almost all of them, except for the ones that PSTA's hosted, have been, you've had to drive there. And they've been like in a parking lot of a shopping center. And then you drive, and then you load up your car with food. And the majority of people here are riding, they don't have a car, and are riding the bus. And they found that I can't remember the percentage, but a very high percentage of the people that came to the PSTA Feeding Tampa Bay events were new to them. They'd never been to a food bank before. So the Feeding Tampa Bay people were really stoked because I did some TV media with their executive director, and they were all excited because we were expanding their reach in Pinellas. So it was great.
So, and Brad, thanks. You said that so much better than I could. The rolling the food bank on wheels during the Christmas time was great, and they got the presentation, now we have it too. The other piece that was brought up in that meeting was the trip to Tallahassee. The legislators, I don't know if you want to call it lobbying or the liaison, and all of the feedback each of the directors gave was so great about our local, about knowing about the funding, the medical, the care rides, I mean, the green initiative with, I mean, everything that we were doing, everything that's important to us, the folks in Tallahassee know about. I mean, so now let's hope that translates into the proper funding and proper attention and all that. That's everything that I saw at that meeting. It was a good meeting.
It was a good meeting. That was a great summary.
All right, thank you. All right, well then, if we're done with that, then Lori, if you'll take the...
Well, the Forward Pinellas now, two of us are on the Forward Pinellas Citizens Advisory
Should
Committee.
we take a minute to say that by my rolling up into the chair, Lori is going to take the PSTA liaison.
Well, at least speaking about it, you're still the CAC rep, but yes.
We'll fix that next year.
But one of the things, and Duncan's talked about this before, unfortunately, what happens is Forward Pinellas' meeting is, in fact, this time, it's the same week. It's going to be on Thursday. So, you know, I'm sort of looping back to say, well, what did we talk about in December, which we at least did have a December meeting where there was not a December meeting for the TRAC. But unfortunately, at Forward Pinellas, they don't videotape it, because I know when I was trying to recap things from our meetings, I could go back and rewatch it. I'm looking at the minutes, but some exciting things, I'm like, I didn't remember that. I didn't, you know, so.
It was an end of year meeting.
No, but there were some interesting things. They were talking about the T-Bar Regional Transit Development Plan, which at the time sounded really interesting, but I cannot tell you what that I know. They talked about the South Pasadena Corridor Study. And so it was interesting information. The one thing I keep always seeing is every time I go to the CAC, the commitment to transit in Forward Pinellas is huge. They really understand that this is something that matters among the members of the committee and among the members of Forward Pinellas, that having good transit is a really important part of moving people effectively around our county, around our region. And I also hear that them, having a real dedication to the regional focus, the regional focus of T-BARTA, the regional focus of all of what they do. So, but in terms of being current on any interesting things that were happening, I really couldn't even begin to tell you at this point. But I know there was a survey that they had wanted, and I did send that to Mary Ann to send it out to all of you. I don't know if we might email it or not. Anyway. And when we hear about that, we will let you know, so you can keep telling people we need to have good transit. We need good transit.
Shall I make the same pitch I make every time? Anyone who lives in the county of Pinellas can belong to the citizen group or within Forward Pinellas. Those guys are great people. Anything to do with zoning, parks, rivers, walking trails, bike paths, and transit, roads, pedestrian. They're great. Down where the trouble is between FDOT, so there's the disconnect there. Those guys are a little too interested in freeways and tollways and that kind of stuff.
But again, Whit Blanton really cuts it down to saying, hey, but we're already built out here, so we don't need good highways,
right.
More good highways here. We really need more other ways, transit, to get people around.
Yeah. So thanks, Lori. All right. Then with that, the next thing is the minutes. Did everybody get a copy, have a chance to read the minutes? And does anyone see any corrections or modifications or errors or improvements? If not, I need someone to call for the approval. We'll make that motion. We have a motion.
I got a motion.
There's a motion and a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. And then if we can have an approval then, I have the motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes as they stand, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I guess it carries unanimous. My first motion, thank you guys. Then with that, what do we have on the agenda today? We're going to talk about the sunshine and procedural. So who's going to cover this for me? Where we are? Isabel. It's our annual, this is your penance for joining TRAC.
It is.
Remember, to get out your ticket, you need to get them punched.
You get regular reminders on staff.
I know, absolutely.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isabella Sobel. I'm an attorney in the General Counsel's Office for PSTA. I'm here to talk to you about some general etiquette, meeting etiquette, and mostly I'm here for the legal stuff, the Sunshine Law and public records. So it's very important if you're on any kind of committee such as this, you're giving recommendations to a governing board of a governmental entity. These are all applicable to you, so let's get started. So your bylaws, they should be at your seat, should have been provided to you. They're pretty much like your roadmap to being on track. So it'll tell you really, what the purpose of the committee is. Generally, it is to provide recommendations to the PSTA governing board, just from your point of view and from, in terms of ridership and whatever items come before you. The organization of meetings, just your general responsibilities. Definitely review the bylaws, keep them with you, review them from time to time. It's never a bad idea to review them before a meeting, just to kind of remind yourself of your responsibilities and how the meetings typically go. Some important notes from your bylaws is, first of all, please make sure you provide your current and correct information to PSTA staff. I believe that would be Mary Ann, would be the correct person. So if you have recently moved, or if you moved during your term, make sure that, or if you have a phone number change or email change, or you're not using the email that you provided to Mary Ann in the first place, please make sure that's current. It's very important. Also, in order to actually vote or really conduct any TRAC business, there must be a quorum. A quorum will be half of your membership plus one. If you do not have half of your membership plus one, you cannot vote on anything. And really, it ends up being a little bit of a waste of everyone's time. So it's really important to respond to your quorum emails within 48 hours. That is also within your TRAC bylaws. I believe you'd be responding to Mary Ann, so just make sure you keep your eye out for your quorum emails, and just reply back to Mary Ann. Please do not reply all. If you do, it's not the end of the world, but it's just really, and we'll see a little bit later, it's for Sunshine Law purposes, and it's just a little bit better to respond just to Mary Ann. Also, it's really important in your bylaws, it's really important to make sure that you're regularly attending meetings. So according to your bylaws, you have to attend 80% of your meetings. So that generally comes out to, you can only miss, at the very most, one out of every 4 meetings. And you cannot miss more than 4 meetings in a 2-year term. So unless you really, really can't be there for a specific reason, really try to make every regularly scheduled meeting. These aren't really points of law, really. This is just what really points of general common courtesy and what really PSTA is asking of you. I know Mary Ann and Cassandra kind of put this presentation together for you, especially the parts on etiquette and efficiencies. I will say that generally, in terms of meeting organization, as he has done today, Mr. Duncan, your chair, will generally facilitate the meetings. In his absence, the vice chair will do that for him. He really organizes the points of order. If there's any public comment, really to ask for public comment before acting on any item before a vote is preferable, if we can remember to do it. And also just a general public comment section at the beginning of the meeting, as he did today. And generally, instead of speaking over one each other, you wait to be recognized by the chair. The PSTA board does this as well in their own way. So oftentimes just, Mr. Chair, may I please speak, and he'll address everyone generally in the order that they would wish to speak, but we do want to make sure everyone has a fair chance to speak. Just one thing to kind of remember is that not only are you representing yourself, but you're also representing TRAC and PSTA. This is official public business, and what you do and what you say at these meetings is well documented in the public record. So we just want to make sure that we act in a way that we're all proud of. This is generally just the same thing, just being courteous. This is the place to make sure that we're, giving great recommendations to the governing board of PSTA and not arguing with each other. So it just kind of goes back to what we were saying before. Okay, here's the legal stuff. And this is the, as important as that stuff is, this is why I'm really here. This is, my area of expertise. And so we are going to have two separate sections. So first we have the Sunshine Law, which is the public meetings law. Then we have the second part is public records. So if at first you feel like I'm not covering public records, I promise it's coming. It's just this is the order that we're taking it right now. Generally, I will let you know that the Sunshine Law is not nearly as broad as the public records law. So we'll take it from there. So the general point of the Sunshine Law and the Public Records Law really is just we don't want the public, we don't want our voting citizens to think that we're making decisions and deciding the fate of our region and our state in back rooms, making backroom deals. Local business, public business is conducted in the sunshine, in public, and the general citizens have a right to participate in that. And this is the reasons why we need to abide by the Sunshine Law and the Public Records Law, also because there are different penalties for not doing so, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But really that's the idea of open government and it being accessible to every citizen, every resident. So, so PSTA is an independent special district of the state of Florida. It's a governmental entity. It has a governing board, which makes the official decisions on behalf of the entity. That's your board of directors. You, TRAC, you're a committee that makes recommendations to the governing board. That means you are subject to the Sunshine Law, so it's applicable to you, so just remember that if you're ever questioning that. Essentially, if you are not at a noticed meeting of TRAC, basically in this room, unless there's a change of location, and it's been properly noticed by Mary Ann and Rachel Coppola, you are not to be discussing TRAC business with another member of TRAC. So that means you should not be talking over the phone, over email. You should not be texting each other. You should not be commenting on each other's Facebook posts. You should not be sending each other TikTok videos about TRAC business. Really, TRAC business is anything that could reasonably come before you for a vote. I see a lot of advisory board members kind of take that really literally and say, if it's not on my agenda, I can talk to another board member about that. I would say that's can be a little precarious. If it was me personally, I would not talk about TRAC business generally, or even PSTA business generally, with another member of my board, unless that I was at a properly noticed public meeting, as you are right now. It just gets to be very slippery slope. You talk about, you start talking about, bus routes, you start talking about shelters, anything like that, ridership issues. In the end, you're a ridership board, and those kind of issues are going to come before you for a vote. So I would encourage you all to, if you see each other in Publix, or if you see each other at a social event, a chamber event, or you see each other on the bus, to talk about anything except for TRAC business or PSTA business. Talk about your kids, your vacations, what schools you went to, where you live. honestly anything but PSTA or TRAC business unless you're in this room at a properly noticed meeting. This is the time to talk about the TRAC and PSTA issues. Even if it's not, technically on the agenda, you can still, this is the time to talk about the issues that you might want to address at another meeting, you might want to vote on another meeting, but it is a violation of the Sunshine Law to talk about TRAC business unless you're in this room, no matter what medium you're using. Any questions so far? Yes.
One general and one specific.
Sure.
General is, are sunshine laws unique to the state of Florida, or are they pretty much the same everywhere? Because when you say sunshine, I think Florida. But
That's a very good question. Florida has some of the broadest sunshine law and public records laws in the country. Almost every state has some kind of version of the sunshine law, or really open meetings or public records laws. But Florida's are incredibly broad, and I've heard someone who's really an expert on this topic say that we always hear, oh, Florida man did this, Florida man did that,
Yes.
in the
Yes.
national media. But it's really because our public records laws are so broad that it's very easy for someone to get their hand on a police report or some kind of meeting report or what have you. It's a lot easier to do that here than say in Virginia. In Virginia, I couldn't even get the case number of a case that the opinion was already online, but they didn't want to give me the case number. So in Florida, you can find out almost anything you want to find out pretty easily by making, making a public records request. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's an excellent question.
then the other question is, and this is specific, two of us are members of two committees. When we talk about things relative to Forward Pinellas, are we like violating sunshine laws because we're both Forward Pinellas members, or if we're Forward Pinellas, if we talk about something relative to TRAC, even in the open at the meeting? I mean, how do those things overlap each other? And there are members of the CAC who have been board members from PSTA and so forth.
That's where I why I encourage you, unless you're at a publicly noticed meeting, don't speak about
And
transit
somebody
issues.
else's, but they overlap.
The CAC is a public, open.
Right.
Okay, so
meeting,
so we
notice
can,
meeting.
okay, yeah, I was just
Just
curious.
like this one is. So you can say anything you want to.
Right,
Don't.
right.
Thank you, thank you.
Here,
Yeah.
right now.
Thank you.
As long as you're at a publicly noticed meeting, and exactly what Brad said, for Pinellas, if they're making recommendations, I'm not involved in your committee for Ford Pinellas, but it's my understanding that they are subject to the Sunshine Law. You're
They absolutely
You're making
are, but I didn't know
recommendations.
because we're both on
Yeah,
both.
so, and it just kind of brings me back to my point, unless you're in a publicly noticed meeting for any of those entities, don't talk about transit issues. It's just, it gets really slippery really quickly. Any other questions so far? Generally, here's some, this is the statutory requirements of the Sunshine Law. They must be open to the public, so you can't have them somewhere, you can't have a meeting where you're expecting 100 people to show up to talk on an issue in a small office. You can't have a public meeting outside the jurisdiction, typically. You have to have room for the public to come and sit like we do here. We have plenty of room. Has to be open to the public. You cannot be locking people out. Also, you cannot require someone to show an ID in order to come into a public meeting. You cannot require someone to buy something to enter a public meeting. They generally have to be open and accessible to the public. Reasonable notice of such meetings. The statute, it really just says reasonable notice. It doesn't give you any other details besides that. Case law has helped shape that. Your bylaws, however, do dictate what the amount of time your meeting should be noticed, and your bylaws say 7 days for a regular meeting for it to be noticed, and 3 days for an emergency or a special meeting for it to be noticed. It'll be typically noticed on the PSTA website as well as within this administrative building, and that is perfectly fine. Also, minutes of the meeting must be taken. So this is the minutes is kind of a relic. It's a little bit outdated now, especially with so many entities either audio recording or videotaping or live streaming their meetings. but this is what is required. It doesn't have to be a verbatim, it has to be a written document. It doesn't have to be a verbatim, or you don't have to have a court reporter making a transcript. It just has to have a general summary of what happened in the meeting, who was in attendance, what action items were voted on, which members voted which way, and the outcome of the action items for the meeting. And I believe that, Mary Ann, that is something that you are in charge of for this, but just something to keep in mind. There's no requirement to have public meetings videotaped or audio recorded, but as we know, that is something that many local entities choose to do now, but it's just not required. So the Sunshine Law does not apply to staff or internal staff or meetings. So any member of TRAC can speak to any PSTA staff member about a voting item or PSTA or TRAC business. You can talk to another member of the public within taste. You can talk to literally anyone except for your fellow members of TRAC without violating the Sunshine Law. Now, there might, not to get too complicated, there might be other statutes or rules of decorum that might prevent that, but just generally for your purposes, as long as they're not speaking to another member of TRAC outside of a publicly noticed meeting, you should be fine. But you can always call Cassandra or Mary Ann if you have any kind of questions, as long as you're not including other members of your board in your email or your phone call or your meeting. So again, if you see each other at any other location besides here at your publicly noticed meeting, on the bus, at the grocery store, at a soccer game, you're allowed to talk to each other. You don't have to avoid each other like the plague. You don't have to avoid eye contact. You don't have to hide from each other. All you have to do is just not talk about PSTA or TRAC business.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Well, like, there's a few of us ride the bus together. We were just downstairs talking about the schedule and how the schedule changed and stuff like that. I mean, is that? 'Cause
So
it could come up in a meeting sometime about how they've cut down different, just saying how it's better, but.
Sure. So, I mean, as a general rule of thumb, you can say, hey, my bus was late today, or I took this route number. But just, you have to be really careful, because you know how conversations flow between people who have things in common. There's a difference between saying, I took this route, or my bus was late, and saying, I took this route, but I think another route would be better, let's bring it up at TRAC. Or maybe you should bring this up at a board meeting, or saying, my bus is late, how can we fix this at PSTA? So, or through TRAC. So there's a difference. I mean, there's polite conversation, and really the keeping this presentation in mind, keeping your handouts in mind. You'll also have a Sunshine Law handout in front of you, and your PowerPoint. Keeping these things in mind, and kind of using your gut as your guide, just like anything else in life. Sometimes you're gonna have an interaction that you just feel is getting on the borderline, and trust your gut with that. So, I mean, these are pretty complicated concepts. So, but this is our responsibility. Your responsibility as TRAC members. So, just kind of something to let your gut guide you sometimes.
Something that I think we get tied up with a lot is that there are very few things we actually do as a board. I mean, when the two of us are sitting on the bus and say, boy, the traffic's heavy today, this is a lousy driver, or boy, this is a great driver, boy, see, we should tell someone about it. Those aren't things that are going to come up at TRAC. The things that we see at TRAC are plans, well, anything, as you're into a couple, 3 meetings, those of us who've been here a year, things that we voted on, those are things you shouldn't be on a bus or at a soccer game saying, hey, next month when that thing comes up, what do you think? We should get this on the agenda. That's what's in the business. But everything, the majority of stuff, we all ride buses. The majority of our experience. Did you see how much graffiti was on that? Boy, did you see that those new lights really look nice? That's all part of our purview. Don't be afraid to talk about buses. Just like any other bus rider, it's the things that we cover here. If there's not going to ever be a vote on it, then you'll have a feel pretty quick about what kind of stuff we vote on. Don't worry about it. But yeah, that stuff, let's not be conspiring at a bus stop about, let's get that on the agenda. Hey, remember to vote no.
We don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it again. My personal, if it was me, I would talk about my dog. I'd keep talking about my dog or my kids. Leaving it, oh, I took this route. Just honestly, it gets to be very slippery, and you never know what's going to come in front of you.
Absolutely.
Your agenda is a good guide, but it's not the end all be all, and you really could have a lot of different things coming in front of you in the future. But that is a good point. Okay, so you do have do's and don'ts. That's a good guide. Just kind of with your gut. You can't kind of skirt the sunshine law by having Mary Ann or someone ask different members of the board how they're going to vote, and then acting as a go-between. So don't try to be clever, stuff like that. It's still a violation of the sunshine law. So just really don't try to figure out how people are going to vote on certain action items or why they're going to vote a certain way. Just leave it for this meeting, because you should be discussing why you're voting a certain way at the public meeting. That's the whole point. Okay. Again, if you have a question, if you think that something's on the border, you've really thought it out, you've looked at your do's and don'ts, you've looked at your handout, and you really still have a question, I think you can email Mary Ann, and she can either answer it or she can forward it to the appropriate person who can help you out with that. So you personally can be liable for violations of the sunshine law. It's not just PSTA, it's you personally. A knowing violation can send you to jail. Now, most of the violations are not knowing, so you're not going to jail if you inadvertently respond all. Don't worry about it. But if you know that something is a violation of the sunshine law and you do it anyway, if you get caught, there are some pretty serious consequences: jail time, civil penalties, criminal penalties. You can have an ethics investigation, and as an attorney who defends ethics investigations, they are not very fun. So just something to keep in mind: you are personally liable for your adherence to the sunshine law. Okay, public records. So the public records law is broader than the sunshine law. So the sunshine law is just any two members of the same committee. So for you, it's you and any other member of TRAC discussing anything that may come before you at a meeting, at a TRAC or PSTA meeting. That's a violation. A public record is anything made or received in accordance with public business or TRAC business. So any emails you receive from Mary Ann, any emails other emails you may receive, the minutes, any kind of written documents, all these papers in front of you right now are public records. And I know that they've cut this slide into two. Any tape recordings, photographs, text messages, social media posts, anything can be that is made or received in accordance with official PSTA or TRAC business is a public record. It doesn't really matter the medium, as long as you're discussing TRAC business or it's perpetuating TRAC business, then that is a public record. So that covers a lot more than just the sunshine law. Typically, the emails you receive from Mary Ann or any other staff member at a PSTA email are going to be preserved on the PSTA server, so you don't have to worry as much about that. However, I would advise you to either make a separate folder for your TRAC or PSTA emails, or you can also make a separate account. You can, go to Gmail, Teresa at PSTA, .com, whatever's not taken. You can also make a different account. That keeps it nice and separated. So if you ever do receive a public records request for your emails, you do not have to go digging through your work or personal account to find all those emails. So your personal notes, if it's just literally your own personal notes at a meeting, just to remind yourself or to jog your own memory, then that is not a public record. However, if you send those notes to anyone else, involve a PSTA or TRAC, that becomes a public record. So if you're just taking notes for yourself, you keep them in your own TRAC notebook, you never show them to anyone else, that's not a public record. Or if you have your notes and you're like, oh, I have some interesting points, I'm going to send them to Mary Ann, that becomes a public record. That's something to keep in mind.
Question on that, if we're sending it to a staff member, doesn't that automatically create that record?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
So we can send anything to staff, and the records are done by PSD, that's what I thought.
Yes, but there is a possibility of getting, and we've had it with a different, entity recently, that someone can request your original emails. So that's why we do request that you, or would advise that you either have a separate folder within your email account or create a different email account. That's the advice we've given based on experience that we've had recently. So, but yes, if it's on a PSTA server, then yes, it's going to be preserved. You don't have to worry as much about that. However, if you're receiving an email from a citizen, there's no PSTA server involved. We would suggest that you either copy Mary Ann or you're the appropriate person. Yeah, for public records.
Or Rachel Capola.
Okay. Copy Mary Ann or Rachel Capola on your response back to that person, or forward that email chain to Mary Ann or Rachel Capola. So that way they can preserve them for you. I highly suggest that you do not text anyone about PSTA or TRAC business. It's very hard to preserve. Same thing with Facebook, messages, Facebook posts, TikToks, Instagram. It's just incredibly hard to preserve. We've seen in litigation how difficult it is, and basically every resident or every individual corporation, entity, what have you, in the state of Florida has the right to request to see your public records, to copy and inspect them. So if you can't preserve them, that's a potential violation of the public records laws. So if it was me, I would stick to email, email communication, or in person. If you speak to someone in person, if you speak to Mary Ann in person or on the phone, no public records are created. So then there's nothing to preserve. So just something to keep in mind. My clients oftentimes like to pick up the phone and give me a call for that reason. So it just creates less work in terms of public records preservation. Any questions on that? Yes.
I have two questions. One, for example, if you use my work email, and I do have a separate folder. It's just I'm thinking, if something happens and one of us, I leave the job, I will not have an access. So but if I'm copying Mary Ann, it means it doesn't matter because all the public records were created. I don't have to go back and ask my employer to is this correct?
I mean, if it was me, I would probably forward all of those emails. I couldn't imagine there would be that many. Maybe there are to a different address.
Okay.
Can I take a stab at that with some common sense? It'd be very rare, Roman, that you would write me directly, that we wouldn't also be CCing Mary Ann or Cassandra or Bob or something. And the moment someone's on that chain that is at PSTA, it's in the public records.
Yeah.
So when Joe out there says, I want to know everything associated with such and such event, if those words were in that, it'll get sucked up. The only trouble is if I'm writing to you, you're writing to me, we're texting you and this and that. That's when we've got a problem. As long as we're always got someone from PSTA
Yeah, I don't have a
involved.
problem copying.
Exactly. Well, yeah.
Yeah, and second question would be, for the past 5, or maybe it's difficult, maybe then 10 years, did any of the advisory committee members had any problems with the sunshine law that involved attorneys? For the past 5 or 10 years, did any of the advisory committee members like me right now have any problems that involve attorneys for a violation of this sunshine?
At TRAC, not to my knowledge, but there are other entities, and it always comes out of the blue. We had one in one city where there hadn't been a public records request in 20 years, and they were saying a lot of stuff. Oh, you're fine if someone else,
Just for your information, PSTA probably averages getting a public record request maybe more than one per day.
Yeah.
We get hundreds of public records requests from attorneys who are looking into a accident and they want information about the bus that
Okay.
maybe hit their client.
I want the
We-
videotape, I want,
we
was my
get-
kid on
there
the
are-
bus, did the...
There are a handful of citizens out there in the community that are not so favorable to public transportation, do public record requests all the time.
They watch our videos too.
They watch the videos,
Go for
then
it.
they see something that might come up in this meeting, and then they'll be like, oh, that's interesting, let me do a public record request. It's a standard thing, and we do it all the time. It's like, I've never heard of the record request that Isabella referenced where someone has said, no, I really want to see the original email and not just the copy that PSTA got, but I guess that theoretically could happen.
It's happened to one of our clients recently. So just, I think our advice, it changes as the law changes, and it also changes as, our experience changes. But I would say that typically, yeah, if there's a PSTA email attached to that chain, you're in a much, much better position than if.
I can't recall of any records requests related to TRAC member activity, but I could be wrong. I mean,
So there
I
was
don't-
no criminal liability for,
No.
okay, good.
Well,
Better.
yeah, not in a while. But I got to tell you, they come out of the blue, and just always better to have this in mind, because you don't want to be the learning story. You don't want to be, oh, it didn't happen in 20 years, but it happened to my friend. So crazy. So
could happen.
this is why.
You want to be the case in paper chase.
This is why I'm here, because it could happen to you. So just because it hasn't happened to a TRAC member in years does not mean that it couldn't happen to you tomorrow. So just, they wouldn't have me here talking about this if it wasn't important and something that was
in
up.
Florida, like Florida man story,
Yeah.
there are attorneys out there that make money off of trying to catch us
Exactly.
for violating
Very
these
good point.
laws. I mean, they will deliberately send, I don't know, they deliberately try to get you to mess up and not produce a record that they know you have somehow, just to get money, just to get us to pay them money.
Exactly. Remember that. that is very, very true.
They
And
tend to
if-
go more after the institution and not a committee like this.
Yeah.
Deepest pocket.
well,
I don't know.
I mean, if you had a neighbor that didn't like you, they could, and the intent in a public records request doesn't matter. So even if you think that they have a malicious intent, it doesn't matter. Like, you still, or the institution still has the responsibility to produce those records. So just something to keep in mind. Keep in mind. So if you receive. Yeah, so here we go. Just avoid using methods of communication that are hard to preserve. Again, for me, outside of emails and written U.S. mail, I try not to text or use any kind of social media messaging. It's just too hard to preserve. We went over this, your notice public record, only if you send them to basically only if you send them to someone else or use it in a sharing kind of way. If you have any questions, contact PSTA staff. If you personally receive a public records request that, so you may have a citizen or whoever either asks you in person or by email or by phone for, records having to do with anything to do with TRAC or PSTA. So if they ask you they don't have to say, I'm making a public records request. They don't have to say, they don't have to really be all that specific. As soon as if you feel anyone asking for any kind of records for TRAC or PSTA, acknowledge the request. Typically, I feel like it would be by email. Send a quick email back. I received your request. We are working on it, and we'll get back to you. Then immediately respond or forward or call Marianne or Rachel Coppola and immediately let them know that you've received this public records request, exactly what they asked for. You and the institution have a duty to respond within a reasonable amount of time. The new case law says that you're not supposed to say, oh, no, that's not me, ask Rachel, ask Mary Ann. Do not say that. Say, I've received your records request, we are working on it. Then outside of that chain, contact Mary Ann or Rachel Coppola to work on that records request. But that's very, very important, and it's kind of a new area of the law that's been shaping recently. So, any questions on that? Voting, this is kind of just a quick side note. Voting, you generally have an obligation to vote on any action item that comes before you. You have to vote in public and the record. You can't do a secret ballot. You can't decline to vote just because it's an unpopular item or you might have an unpopular decision. The only time that, for an advisory committee, that you wouldn't be able to vote is that if you had a bona fide conflict of interest. That typically involves any kind of financial interest. So if you have any kind of ownership in a company that is coming before you that you're voting on, anything like that, sorry, if I was you, I would contact Mary Ann or just so you can get your question out there. You do have a form you need to fill out if you're going to abstain from voting, but generally it's got to be a financial interest. Yeah.
I just had a quick clarifying question about sunshine laws, because I know they can be confusing. If I understand correctly, the reason that the sunshine laws are important is because we want to make sure that as a public entity and as a part of a committee that is informing or recommending action items to a governing body, is because you want to prevent people conspiring with each other to sway a vote. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's generally correct. Really, it's the legislature who, decides, what is the policy that we're going to, shape our law, that's going to shape our laws. But yes, that's my general understanding. Again, we don't want any backroom deals. It all needs to be out in the public, out in the open. This is a decision that we're making about the public interest, and these are the reasons why.
And it's done ethically and without people conspiring with each other to vote together or to make sure there's a majority. So that's why it's important as TRAC members to not discuss TRAC business outside of this meeting space here, because this is where the public meeting is being held, and that's why it's important to abide by that. So that, it just to clarify, because I know it's confusing for me sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, Jessica, but our meetings and our decisions is just a recommendation, correct? It's actually, in fact, doesn't mean that they're going to be enacted. It's just a recommendation to a board.
So you're making a recommendation, but any committee or board making a recommendation to a governing board, and that's exactly what you're doing, is covered by the Sunshine Law.
Right.
So again, the Sunshine Law does apply to you. You are making recommendations to the PSTA board. So you must abide by the Sunshine Law.
I feel powerful.
Yes. Okay. Anything else? All right, thank you all so much for your time. You've been a great audience. And if you end up thinking about, if you have a burning question that you really can't figure out what to do, go ahead and email Mary Ann, and she'll get you to the right person to try to make it.
No, don't write me.
That's what it sounded like to me. Don't call me.
And don't ask me if you see me on a bus.
I wish what we did was so important.
Yeah, right, I would think, that's right.
At least we have $1 budget that we.
Thank you. Initiatives?
Yes.
Service change or initiatives?
Service initiatives, excuse me.
Next. All right, let's find out how many people did their homework over the holidays. We sent you home to think what things TRAC might look into as their initiatives. Each year we do, as a group, initiatives, and
Yeah.
this is your chance to, it's not the end all, but it's certainly a good starting point to start that conversation. So
Yes.
let's turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole Dufa. For those of you who are new to the TRAC, I'm one of the public engagement planners. Juan is my counterpart here. We're part of our outreach team in the planning department here at PSTA. And as a part of your time on TRAC, each year for the last, I think this will be our third year actually, coming up with initiatives that you all as a TRAC want to work on for the coming year. So in the past, last year we had a special workshop where we did a brainstorming session where we essentially took a list of everything that you all care about in regards to our transit service. So things that you want to see improve, things that you personally want to work on with PSTA to make it better for you as a rider or for you and your fellow riders. Last year, the TRAC committed to continuing our TRAC Star Award. So our TRAC Star Award is the award that the TRAC created. Like, this is an award specifically created by you all as this committee to celebrate and reward companies, agencies, businesses who are doing maybe constructing things, whether that's a new sidewalk, whether that's adding a crosswalk, that speak to access improvements to transportation, right? So we were awarding Publix, Walmart. What were some examples that we did last year?
Cities.
The cities, county, right, adding crosswalks and parking lots. I know, Gloria, you spearheaded one of those at the Countryside Mall, is that correct?
Well, at a bank.
At a bank.
Countryside Mall's been terrible.
Okay. At a bank.
Yes, at a bank there, but-
So that was our TRAC Star Award. And then last year, the other initiative was to volunteer with our public outreach efforts. Because Juan, Bob, and I, as a part of our external public outreach and engagement team, we go out into the community, promoting PSTA services, going maybe surveying riders, maybe just tabling at an event, but you all volunteered, a handful of you volunteered more than once to come out on behalf of PSTA and talk about our service. So those were, yes, thank you very much for that. That is incredibly helpful for us. We're a small team of 3 and we can't be everywhere at once. But this year, we'd like to focus on new TRAC members, so we have some new voices on the board, or on the committee here. So today, this is just a quick brainstorming session, because we want to think about, or we want you all to think about what you'd like to do as a part of your TRAC. So we know we spoke about how you make recommendations to our PSTA board, but in addition to that, here are the ways that you can also work as a committee to make improvements at PSTA. So some of the proposed initiatives from the past were teaching people, like being your own how to ride teachers. We get requests all the time for show me service. How do you ride the bus? People are new to our county. People, they don't want to drive anymore. They want to take the bus. So that was one of the suggestions. Creating different types of mats, advocating for transit-oriented development, but we narrowed it down to the TRAC Star Award and the serving as PSTA ambassadors, because those are reasonable as far as time commitment and your efforts and your expertise as TRAC riders, or as PSTA riders. So I'd love to send it over to our chair to see if you have any initial suggestions.
I did my homework, so let me start with the one that I thought of. My problem still is often the things that I wish to see done and I'd like to see us do, I don't know that we're capable of doing. So they're more just like, what a good idea. And that is, I'm obsessed with regional coordination with Hillsborough and Pasco. Although as a rider committee, it almost comes out like write a letter and say, do that more. So, but regional coordination. But the second, I think we can, and that is the amount of opponents. Everyone knows the term NIMBY, not in my backyard. The number of NIMBYs that have come out against the BRT up Central Avenue. I wish maybe as a group we might take a stance to be positive. Certainly, first off, we should find out if we support that, and if we do something proactive. So we would be, and I don't know if you've heard this new word, YIMBYs. Yes, in my backyard. And let us lead that charge as being a positive word. That one we can do. Regional, I don't know what we can do, but certainly being a YIMBY for the BRT is something we could do. Anyone else have initiatives or ideas that they've been thinking we might be able to do this year? Yes,
Well,
Gloria.
of course, yeah.
Absolutely.
And when you went regional, that's exactly what I'd written down
course.
here also, because for a lot of us, it's like, we have a very acceptable system here. We can always be better, but I think a lot of us are happy with some of what we have here. But try to get to Tampa, and we were just talking, it's actually gotten worse. It's, now we can't easily get to the airport if we're in wheelchairs, if it's not during the hours when the buses are running. Really crazy. And I think we should be still screaming about how much, as transit riders, we're a region. And the other thing that I'm always fighting for is regional paratransit. If a person in Pinellas County gets cancer and they want to go to Moffett, good luck if they're in a wheelchair. Good luck. It's not, wheelchair transport is very expensive to get to Hillsborough County. So I'd love to see us doing something about that. And then consistent with some of the things that you were talking about in terms of like when you're talking about the BRT, not in my backyard, one of the things I always hear people talk about is, I don't want to ride with those people. And I would love to see us be able to do something about the image of riders, because here's a group of some really smart, involved people. We're volunteering, and but we're transit riders. And so I think that the idea of the image of a transit rider being, just like you, except smarter. I think
Transit savvy, more transit savvy.
well, smarter and more fiscally reasonable too. But the point is that that's one thing I want to throw out, something we could do for our volunteers.
Hi. Oh, real quick, so I just wanted to recap so my note taker here is able to capture everything that we're saying. What I did here for Gloria is promoting regional paratransit, and changing the image of riders, or finding some way to help change the image of riders, or promote the image of riders as we all are. It's not just one type of person, right? We're from all different
Just like
walks of life
everybody else.
using the bus. And I would say yes in my backyard just in general, right? You were saying as a YIMBY, saying yes in my backyard to.
Well, in my case is BRT, because
Is
I've gone
BRT.
up against them
Okay.
three times.
Okay.
But it certainly, as a separate issue,
Transit
positive,
in
all of
general.
this kind of comes together. Maybe this is the year of just salute the flag, of saying, we're here, let's.
And then, yes, anything else that was missing from here that I know that we want to make sure that Juan captured? Okay.
Hi, I'm Andrea, and I'm new this year. I work for the Pinellas County Property Appraiser's Office.
Okay.
And people come to me for homestead applications. I'm the homestead lady. And so I really know about the sunshine laws. Anyway, I tell people all the time, they say, how do you get to work? I say, I take the bus. And people say to me, well, I just bought this condo. How do I get to wherever? And I pull up the PSTA website. I think it would be amazing. There's a lot of new condo development that if we could partner with maybe some of the condo associations or some local, gathering places to give maps, schedules, whatever we can do, maybe do some presentations to say, you can't get there from here.
I love that. And you all are your own transit experts. You use the bus, you know how to navigate our maps, you know how to navigate our apps, you know how to navigate our schedules, you understand, and you are some of the best resources that we have for teaching others how to ride PSTA. Yeah, so to promote transit and teach people about PSTA.
Yeah.
And those are things where, we might get requests for them, but if you have places that you've heard, you could reach out to them directly and say, hey, would you like this? And then speak with us about it. And that's something that we'd be happy to work with. Brad?
All of these ideas that you put up there are outstanding ideas. I guess my question for you, Nicole, is that the programs that TRAC has been sponsoring for the last year, like the STAR Award, does that go away when we pick new ones here, or these are in addition to?
STAR is staying forever.
STAR is staying forever, so then really, we also don't want to put too much responsibility where you are only able to commit to one or two items. So we do want to narrow it down to 2 items for the TRAC initiative. So if the STAR Award stays forever, I know that could use some more life put into it. We didn't, how many awards did we give away last year?
I lost count, I'm sorry. I think we're a total of 6 to 8.
6 to 8.
And we have one upcoming.
We have one upcoming.
Yes.
And I know that that is a really great initiative. We're celebrating developers, we're celebrating businesses, and I think that's something if folks feel strongly about that, that's definitely one that we should keep. And then
That's one that we've already created, and
Yes.
so it's not like we have to do it, that's more like the sunshine thing where someone comes and presents it, or reminds us, this is what we're looking for, and that people just submit it, just like, but that's not a
Just
whole
write
project.
us each month to
Yeah,
keep
just
looking.
remind people to.
Yes, to
look
keep
for
looking
those.
and identifying those businesses talking, because sometimes that stuff, those access improvements don't just come out of nowhere, that it comes at the request of you as riders, telling those businesses, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this, because this is important for us to access your business, for us to get to healthcare appointments, to get to the grocery store. Sometimes those things need encouragement, so that is work on your behalf, or on your part, where you are reaching out to those companies and saying, hey, can you make this change? And that does take some more effort, more than just identifying a new intersection or identifying a new sidewalk. It does take some advocacy on your behalf as well. So Brad, I'm not sure if that answered your question of how many we will.
So is the task this afternoon to pick 2 more from this great list, or to pick 1 more plus the star?
So my understanding, I'm going to take that back to my boss, Bob
Yeah.
Lasher here.
Actually, it's an information item, we're just brainstorming, and then at the next meeting, we will choose your 2
Yes,
initiatives.
this is just an information item, so we are not finalizing any decisions
Okay,
today.
Pressure's off.
The pressure is off for making a decision.
Next month's homework is to decide and come back.
Is to decide and then add any last minute, now that you've had a chance to think about it, now that you're back in the swing of 2020, your first meeting of the year, come next meeting, we will make a decision on how many to vote for. So don't be afraid that this is your last chance to put any items on this brainstorm list, but definitely we'll vote next month. Yes.
Yeah, 2 quick clarification. One, promoting regional paratransit. So I want to make sure that I understand. So my feeling is that getting from St. Pete to Tampa Airport, despite any condition, is difficult.
Yes.
And I haven't found a way which would be efficient of doing that, and that's really, I believe that if we can somehow fix that and make it seamless, and because airport is used by many people and me, and very frequently. So if this include that, that's my point of view, it's a really interesting problem to solve. And second, clarification, so does it include solving that problem or not?
I think you should have that.
If I can take a stab at what we're saying is, that what we're, as a group, as a committee, each year we try to do 1 or 2 things that we put our weight behind.
Yeah.
So when I'm going to the board and say, you guys need to do this,
Yeah.
often we end up writing letters to Tallahassee, something. Or last year we had a volunteer initiative. We all got T-shirts and we went out helping them do some things at different. So this initiative is sort of like whatever we want it to be, and it is, if we as a group get together, what is it, more power for all on the same page. Brad's point is, if you make the list too long, we can't do anything, if we make it too small. So what's an initiative? Paratransit, I didn't realize, I had never really thought about it. I've been so concerned with getting myself to the airport, I never thought if I was disabled, if I was using Care Ride, to get to USF,
You're right,
to get to Tampa
cannot
General.
cross county line.
So that's just that issue. How we would do it, well, if we
We'll talk about
make
that.
that our issue, we might have a subcommittee, we might write a letter, we might, I don't know, have a protest march, whatever we're gonna do, but we'll figure that when we get there, if that's our issue for the year. Like the United Nations, year of the child, the year of the woman, the year of the, it's gonna be the year of the something.
And Brad, you said we should add that to the list,
The airport?
the airport service. Service to the airport, period, is a challenge. We do have our 300X that stops at the airport Monday through Friday.
I hadn't meant to include that under this regional idea, although what we're really saying there is that's to be T-Barda's job, and we're all just kind of
In fact, what I was
griping
thinking
that-
when you were saying that, it would be good, this may even color who we want to invite to our meetings, is to get somebody from T-Barda here to, again, to talk
So
about
we can
where
yell
they
at them,
stand.
or-
And then we
Yeah.
can be an asset, we can be an asset to them, you know,
Right.
that the more that they can tell their story to people like us, you know, we can help them.
Yeah, if that becomes our issue. And it's more than just the airport. I mean, I like to go to the Brandon Mall of all things for silly reasons, and to get from here to there is
So,
crazy.
so you could just add it to, one, you could just add it, our chair is suggesting just adding it to the number one there,
Yeah.
regional coordination.
Regional coordination.
Pasco, Hart, airport.
Yeah, as a frequently used place, you know, and very difficult to get.
Yes.
Yeah, nowhere important, just the airport.
Yeah, just the.
Yeah, right.
Possible to get there on the weekend?
Yeah, I haven't found.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
And-
coming from all over.
If I may.
Or second?
Yeah, a second clarification. So, I'm specifically very interested in how new technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT is used to improve bus system. Is this an initiative that, or it can be, because that's really my part of interest. Yeah, that's.
How what are some ideas that you have, you know, if that's what you're passionate
Yeah.
about? What are some ideas that
First, I
you?
want to figure out, and which is like, will take time, what are you doing right now with that, because some things that you're doing. Second, I want to figure out whom we know here in St. Pete, including my employer, who is doing a lot of all of those. And there are other where I'm not conflicted at all, and figure out how can ward. So first, I need to know the state, and then figure out how to push it forward quicker.
Why don't we put that up as a chance? Because we could easily have someone in 1 month come in and brief us, a different month have an internal briefing, an external briefing. So put that up as, so we'll see how much interest there is in it. I'm not sure exactly how to write it.
would you be willing to-
AI.
Yes, new technology implementation. It could be AI, ML, which is machine learning, and IoT.
Sure. Actually, and not to change the subject, but when I was talking about regional coordination, I rode up to Newport Richie and I was looking at all those dead flamingo boxes, thinking, here we go, as I was putting quarters in their boxes and the fare car in our boxes, you know, so that's the same thing. That part of, even the technology of just the pay system is, you know.
They're not dead, they're asleep.
I meant to say.
They'll be woken up.
Hibernating, like a bear. Hibernating. It's hibernating. It's hibernating.
Almost time for them to wake up.
I tickled it.
You know, and something I will say is if you have ideas that the track doesn't select as their initiative, that doesn't mean that you can't still bring it up and you can't still contact us about it. You know, if you have ideas, I know that those are things where you want to be involved. We will find a way to take your suggestions and work with you with that.
And throughout the year, we're going to have spaces for presentations of our own choosing. I mean, we have some that are kind of given to us, but some that, like, what do you want to learn about it? I'm telling you, if you want to learn about it, we're all going to learn about it.
Does anyone have any other initiatives that they'd like to add to the list?
I don't know that this merits it, but I've been referring to us as the Transit Riders Advocacy Committee instead of the advisory. And, because we advocate for riders, but I don't know how to, the naming, and I still feel bad every time I go to write out that I'm on track. We don't really have a formal way that we write it. I keep imagining that we would have the PST logo with track under it or something, or transit advisory. So every time I write it, we end up, there's this kind of goofiness to it, so I don't know. I was calling it kind of like logo and naming, like a subcommittee or something, but that's, I wouldn't-
Creating a brand for track.
Yeah, I don't want to certainly talk about like a different, like Dole Bananas, I don't mean anything like that, but just like, where should we write the word track? Should it be to the left or the right, above, below? Should it be in Arial? Should it be in blue or should it be in black? So it always looks the same, that's all.
I feel like that's a great presentation session from our marketing team about branding. You know, maybe they'll be willing to do that.
I love the star. They took a little bit and that star looks beautiful. So we always, whenever you say the star, you always get the right star. You don't have to go invent one. So, all right, branding, there you go, thank you. It's now an initiative. That was easy.
All right, any others to add to this list? that will then take some time. So when you get the meeting notes, you'll see these listed as the ideas that we'll be voting on next time, and we'll be clear with you about how many, whether it's 1 in addition to TRAC Star or 2 in addition to TRAC Star. We'll be clear with that in our notes so that you come prepared for the next meeting to think about what you'd like to have this TRAC 2020 committee work on.
And then we'll figure out exactly whichever ones we pick. One should be for us to push, and then one will be for them to help to us. And yeah, those are great. Those are good lists. Thank you. Thanks,
You're
everybody.
welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, Nicole. We are running long. Do we have time to do the service change presentation?
One, how fast can you do that?
Really fast.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it is a short, easy service change.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that is some good news.
Yeah, so good evening. My name is Juan Luvian, and I'm the other public engagement planner at PSTA. And we typically have service changes about 3 times a year, for those of you that don't know. And this year is going to be pretty easy. I mean, this February is going to be pretty easy. We just have Route 5, Route 79, the Suncoast Beach Trolley, and the Central Avenue Trolley that are changing. So you guys might be asking yourselves, why do we change our the routes? And it could be many different things that or reasons why we're changing our routes. It could be detours that are out there, construction that's taking longer than 1 month. It could be efficiencies that we want to have. We want to improve our on-time performance on a particular route. It could be safety reasons. So those are all the different reasons that we take into consideration when we're making changes to our bus routes here for you guys to improve the bus service. Route 5 will be changing. We are no longer going to Tyrone Mall. We have the Route 7, the 18, and the 23 that do that. We also have a direct connect location at that area. So starting February 2nd, you'll see the Bus 5 only on 5th Avenue North. Route 79 will also be changing.
When you said Tyrone Mall, do you
Tyrone
mean-
Gardens, I'm sorry, Tyrone Gardens.
Yeah.
We're still going to Tyrone Mall, thank you. It's easy to confuse those.
I was gonna say.
Tyrone Gardens,
Whichever, whatever.
Yeah.
Tyrone Gardens is that plaza with the Winn-Dixie, the
Chuck E. Cheese, I don't know if it's still there.
No, the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah. So it's, just to clarify, it is Tyrone Gardens, not Tyrone Mall. And for safety reasons, on Route 79, we're no longer going to Whitney Road over on the backside, over in the Tri-City area. So what our bus will be doing is we're going to be making a left on Roosevelt all the way to our Largo Transit Center. So that's our new Route 79. Our Suncoast Beach Trolley, when you get to see our schedules, we'll have time point over at Johns Pass and over at the Clearwater Beach Transit Center.
So it's going to hang there a little longer, is that what you're saying, or it's going to?
It's going to have time points, so it's easier for our riders to estimate when their trolley is going to get to their location.
Hopefully, well, given Gulf Boulevard being ridiculously bad traffic at all times, I doubt it'll be early and having to hang.
Yeah. And finally, with our Central Avenue trolley, we are adjusting some of the times because of our permanent construction detour over at the pier. So you want to make sure you look at the times when it leaves downtown. Those will be changing. That's Monday through Friday. And we're also making changes to our Saturday and Sunday and holiday times as well. So pick up a schedule, check out the website. All the changes go into effect February 2nd, which is in a few weeks. Any questions? We're good?
Would we be able to look it up on the transit app, or is that still available?
Yes, you would still be able to see the changes in the transit app.
What date will it start?
February 2nd?
Well, I appreciate everybody's time of saying these extra few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, thanks.
And before we adjourn, if anyone has anything really important that can't wait until next month to say or add or ask, we have a chance to, you got everyone's attention for the next few seconds? Okay, then I'll say with no other business, if I can get a call for an adjournment, or do we just adjourn? Do we move in second, or do we just adjourn? I think I just declared.
You can just.
I declare this meeting adjourned. Guys, I'll see you all in a month. Thanks.
All right, as you leave, we have some items here for you as TRAC members.
What is this swag?
So you have a little notebook and a pouch that can hold your.
But who's got a green light Pinellas pen, huh? Yeah.
But mine don't work no more.
Nice, very nice, thank you.
What is this?
You're very welcome. So it's like a little pouch that can hold your books.
No discussion.
I know.
Oh, okay.